Hello, and welcome to ArcGIS Runtime, Jumpstart your app development with toolkits. My name is Mark Dostal. With me today is Nathan Castle. Nathan is a .NET developer at Esri, and I'm an iOS developer. Today we are going to talk about the ArcGIS Runtime Toolkits. Toolkits contain UI components for common mapping scenarios and use cases that are intended to speed up your mapplication development. Esri provides Toolkit for a variety of platforms, including .NET, Android, iOS, and Qt. While there's some variation in the components provided by each platform's toolkits, most follow a common pattern. Today we'll be talking about and demoing the .NET and iOS toolkits. Some of the common components provided in the toolkits are a compass, which shows the orientation when the map is rotated, and when tapped, auto-rotates the map back to north. We have a scale bar showing the map scale that auto-adjusts when the user zooms in or out of the map. There's a bookmarks view that displays a list of bookmarks in your currently loaded web map and allows the user to tap or click on one to zoom to that location or extent. It's very useful to highlight an area of interest easily. There's an augmented reality component which provides easy access to three of the most common AR scenarios: tabletop, flyover, and world scale. This component allows you to quickly add complicated AR functionality to your app. And there's also a legend view, which allows users to easily visualize the features on their map and explain what each of the map symbols represent. And without further ado, we'll jump into a demo on iOS. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at the Toolkit for iOS GitHub repository. This contains all the information you need to download the toolkit, incorporate it into your application, and get up and running quickly. The iOS toolkit supports both the Carthage and CocoaPods package managers, along with a manual build process in case you'd like to customize or extend the toolkit. The list of toolkit components in the iOS toolkit are listed here, some of which we've talked about before. Each component has its own documentation describing the component, along with code snippets to show you how to use it. The toolkit also contains an examples application, which has examples for each of the components in the toolkit, showing the best practice for using them in your own application. The requirements for the toolkit are also listed. We require the Runtime SDK version 100.10 and XCode 12 or higher. There are detailed instructions for CocoaPods, Carthage, and also the manual build process. Switching over to XCode, I have a project set up that displays a simple map. You can see I've already included the ArcGIS SDK framework. And in my view controller, I'm creating a map and adding that map to the map view. Running this, we'll open up the simulator. And you can see here is our simple map. We can zoom in, pan, rotate, and zoom out. But what if we wanted to add a compass to our map? Well, the first thing we need to do is add the toolkit to our XCode project. We're going to use the manual method for doing this. You can see here I've downloaded and cloned the ArcGIS Runtime Toolkit for iOS. The examples application is here. It's got its own project. And the toolkit code is here. You can see all of the different components comprised inside the toolkit. So we're going to take the ArcGIS Toolkit.xcode proj file, drag it and drop it into our project. Next, we have to add the ArcGIS Toolkit framework to our frameworks, libraries, and embedded content setting in our project. Then in our view controller, we can import the ArcGIS Toolkit and add our compass. And drag and drop some code. This code creates the compass using the map view, adds the compass to our view, sets up some margin values, and then creates anchors so that the compass is anchored to the top right of the map. We can build and run this. And now we have the same application, the same map, except if we now rotate it, you can see the compass appears there in the upper right. Rotating back to north dismisses the compass. And if you tap on the compass icon, it will rotate the map to the north and then disappear. The next thing we want to do is add a measure bar, or the measure toolbar. We're going to create a variable for it. We need to have a function that will create it. And then we need to call that function inside our view.did_load. I'm going to drag and drop the contents of the measure toolbar function. So you can see we create a measure toolbar, again using a map view, adding it as a subview to our view, and then setting up the anchors. So the toolbar will be anchored to the top of the map view attribution view. We can build and run this. And you can see now that we have a measure toolbar in our application. It's fully functional, so if we wanted to measure a line, say, list how many miles, in this case statute miles, the units. We can change the units. There's an undo and a redo, and also delete. We can also measure features, which is this icon here, where you would select a feature and it would give you either the area or the length of the polygon or polyline feature. And we also have a polygon tool to measure polygons. This is fully functional editing, so we can add a new side. We can change a vertex. Again, undo, redo, changing the units, or deleting. So in maybe 8 or 10 lines of code, we added a fully functional measure toolbar to our application. Now suppose we want to add a scale bar. So we'll do essentially the same thing. Let's clean this up a little bit. So we create a scale bar function that will create our scale bar. We need to call that function, and then we need to populate it. So we create a scale bar, again passing in the map view. We set up some properties the way we want it on our scale bar, and we add the scale bar as a subview to our view. Again, we set up some margins to create our anchors. The scale bar bottom anchor is going to be constrained to the top of the measure toolbar. So it's going to sit on top of the toolbar here. Build and run that. And you can see now we have a fully functional scale bar that auto updates based on the current map scale. Now I talked about the anchors a little bit. So you can see if we expand the attribution bar here, because the measure toolbar is anchored to the top of the attribution bar, and the scale bar is anchored to the top of the measure toolbar, these adjust automatically and correctly when we expand the attribution view. And again, in maybe a dozen lines of code, we have a fully functional scale bar. And now a legend. So this map that we have here is fairly boring and doesn't have any features at all. So we're going to add a better map. So we have a better map, and now we need to add a mechanism by which we can display the legend. The legend itself is a view controller, so we're going to use the navigation controller to display it. So again, we want to call our legend creation function and then add our legend code. So this is our legend function that creates the bar button item, sets it as the right bar button item with the selector show legend. The show legend method makes a legend view controller using the map view, guards against it being null or nil, and then pushes it onto the navigation controller stack. If we build and run this, you will see we now have a legend button up in the navigation item up on top there, and we're looking at a better map that has much more interesting features. Tapping on the legend button will push the legend view controller onto the navigation stack, and it will display the information in the web map, the information that's displayed on the map. So again, in just a handful of lines of code, we have a fully functioning legend that uses your existing map to populate itself, displaying the information that's in your map in the legend. So that's how easy it is to incorporate the ArcGIS Runtime Toolkit for iOS into your application and easily add powerful components to enhance your application. Thank you. And now we'll switch over to Nathan Castle, who will be demoing the .NET Toolkit.
Thank you, Mark. So let's just get started with the ArcGIS Toolkit for .NET, starting on the GitHub repo. The toolkit is open source, so you can go here, you can fork it, make your own changes, look at the code, do anything you want to do, just like any other open source project. I want to scroll down and highlight. We've got documentation, we've got samples, and we've also got links to the NuGet pages. When you're using the toolkit, you have two options. You can use it as a source code project, you can compile it, you can make changes and include it that way, or you can use the pre-compiled NuGet packages which we share online. And you can see we've got the Toolkit package on NuGet. We've got a few other packages, including a preview version and a AR toolkit with AR components specific to mobile scenarios. And then I'm going to hop over to our documentation page, which we've hosted. You can see we've got a list of controls that are available. Some of them even have screenshots, as well as a table which shows what we support on all the various platforms that we target, including UWP, WPF, Android, iOS, and Xamarin Forms. So let's take a look at the code. I've got the repo pulled down locally. I'm going to go into source, open the toolkit solution. We do separate AR toolkit and the regular toolkit components. So let's just take a look at the regular toolkit. All right, now that it is opened, I can show you the various subprojects that are involved in the solution. We've got subprojects for each of our platforms, as well as a shared project, which includes the shared logic and a lot of the platform-specific content as well, conditionally compiled based on the target platform. I will just take a moment to mention that we're using some more advanced solution features in this project, some of which aren't supported on Visual Studio for Mac. That's not a problem if you're only using Mac to develop your Xamarin iOS applications, for example. You can consume the NuGet packages without a problem. That all works perfectly. You just may not be able to build the overall solution very easily. That is pending change in the future. We've got a preview set of solutions or projects for WPF and UWP, as well as Xamarin Forms implementations. I also want to highlight our samples applications, which show how to use the toolkit components in context. We also use them as functional tests when we develop. So those are great resources. If you want to make changes to components, you can test them with our sample apps. Or if you just want to see what we have available and explore that interactively, that's another great option. So I'll go ahead and build and run the WPF toolkit samples, give you a quick tour. So we've got our bookmarks view and a page for testing this out. You can see we can jump around to toolkits. We do a good job interacting with the built-in theming system, so I can override the appearance as needed. I can really see the full range of functionality this offers. Let's take a look at the map view, where we can see the compass. This looks great. I won't go too much further into this because I think it would be better to show a walkthrough of how you would use this in your app starting from scratch. So let's go ahead and create a new project. And we'll select WPF app.net. So create a .NET Core app. Just give it a name. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is add the ArcGIS Runtime and ArcGIS Runtime Toolkit Packages. So we'll right-click the project, select Manage NuGet, and go ahead and search for these. Install WPF first. And let's install the toolkits. Go ahead and install that. Okay. Heading over to our main window.xaml. Let's go ahead and add some controls. Now I do want to highlight we've got integration with the toolbox in our toolkit and in ArcGIS Runtime itself, so we can just drag and drop some controls onto our canvas. Let's do a compass, a map view, and a scale line. And by default, these are going to fill up the grid, or the map view will at least. Let's give this a name so we can bind the compass and the scale line to it. And we can go ahead and bind. The compass has a GeoView property. We're going to do an element name binding. And that just makes sure the compass has a reference to the map view so it can show the map's orientation. And let's do the same thing for the scale line. And I will just take a moment to mention that while the controls are available and offer similar functionality on each of the platforms we support, they do have APIs that should work well and fit in with the target platform. So in this case, the map view and the GeoView properties are dependency properties. And if you're familiar with WPF, you'll know that's critical for binding support to work properly. That's what we've got set up here. And I'm just going to go ahead and give the map view a basic map so we can run it. We'll just add some references for convenience to make our life a little easier. And let's see what this looks like. We may want to, let's zoom out a little bit. We may want to adjust the positioning of the scale line, so I'm actually going to set that to show up on the top right for compass and scale line bottom left. Same thing for scale line. All right, now this should be ready to run. Let's see what we get. All right, and in just a few lines of code, we've got our scale line. You'll see that's rendering here. Looks good. The compass doesn't show up. It hides by default, so let's change that here with the auto hide property. Set that to false, and now the compass appears. All right, and that is how you use the toolkit in just a few lines of code for your WPF applications. And as a reminder, we do support Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, Xamarin Forms, UWP, and WPF. And we have this handy table which shows which tools are available on which platform.
Thank you, Nathan. That was great. We hope you've enjoyed your overview of the ArcGIS Runtime Toolkits and that you will use them to jumpstart your application development. Here's some additional information. The iOS.NET, Android, and Qt GitHub repositories are listed there. And if you have any questions, you can always post them in the relevant SDK board on GeoNet in the ArcGIS Runtime SDKs community. Thank you again for coming.